Hi, and welcome back to Pick Up the Pieces. I'm Stacy, and we're in the pickup kitchen today. So my family celebrates both Hanukkah and Christmas, and so today we are making a Hanukkah-inspired meal. And so we're starting off with homemade challah, and then we're also going to make honey cake. We are making some baked, like roasted chicken to go with our meal. I'm making matzo ball soup, and so I've got my broth already going for that, which you guys have seen before, and I can certainly link a video for that down in the description. We're making something called Tzimmes, which is a sweet potato carrot sort of baked dish, and we're making Latkes, which are like potato pancakes basically. So that's what we're planning on doing today, and we're going to get going on our challah because it has to rise for quite a while. So we have our ingredients pre-measured. We've got our flour, and we're going to add sugar and salt to that. Now what I tend to do when I make bread is I'll add my salt to my flour, but I like to add my sugar and my yeast and water to a bowl, and I like to activate the yeast that way. Now this recipe says to put the yeast with your flour, but I feel like it will rise slower if we do that. So I'm modifying this a little bit. I have made this recipe before. It comes out great. So I know that kind of the way that I do bread is to always add my sugar and my yeast to my warm water, or if the recipe calls for milk or whatever warm liquid you're using, and that will make it rise faster. So sugar, yeast, and water are here in my bowl, and I'm going to give that a little bit of a mix. And I'm just going to make sure that I get all the yeast down into the water so that it starts to activate. Now this is instant yeast, so it will start working right away, as its name implies. We do not need for this to sit for like 5 or 10 minutes or whatever. It's not necessary because it is instant yeast, but I just like to get it sort of in the water. I like to break up any clumps, and I like to let it meet up with the sugar so that it starts doing its job. So there we go with that. Now it says we have 2 whole eggs, 1 egg yolk, and melted butter. So this is 2 eggs and a yolk, and then I have my 1 egg white put aside. That's going to be used to like sort of brush on the top of the bread before we bake it. So I'm going to add those in. I have 4 tablespoons of melted butter, and it's not piping hot. I let this cool a little bit when it came out of the microwave, so it's not going to cook my egg, and it's not going to hurt my yeast because it's not too hot. We're just going to get that in there. And we're going to give these a mix, and then we're going to add the flour. I'm just breaking up my egg yolks. I didn't whisk up my egg before I put it in here, and that's completely fine. The dough hook will take care of it, but I'm just going to move it along by popping those yolks. And so my mixture of egg and butter and water and yeast and sugar is nicely blended. Now what I'm going to do here is add my flour to the other bread ingredients. It may need anywhere from 3 to 3.5 cups of flour. So I'm going to start with 3 cups, and then if I don't need all of it, I don't have to add it, but what I have found in the past making this is that it did need all of the flour. So I've got some of my flour, and I'm going to combine that, and then I'll add the rest. So that first addition of flour has come together pretty well, and like I said, the recipe says you may not need all the flour, but I have absolutely made this before, and I have used all of the flour that it calls for, so I am just getting it all in there, and then we're going to get this mixed. Now once this comes together, it will knead in the mixer for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to put it aside in a warm place covered, and we're going to let it rise for 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Now this bread, challah, is, in a way it's like a brioche because it has butter and it has egg yolk in it. If you are trying to avoid dairy, you can use oil instead of the butter. But we have no dietary restrictions in our family, so we are using butter in this recipe. And Like I said, if you've never had this before, it's very similar to a brioche bread. So I'm just scraping down the sides here, and we're almost together, and then it'll knead for 5 minutes. Okay, so my dough came together, and now I'm going to let this knead for 5 minutes, and when it is done kneading, I will show you what it looks like. It's been 5 minutes, and now our bread dough is ready. I'm going to transfer this into another bowl because I'm going to use my mixer again. I'm going to make a honey cake, so I'm going to be using my mixer again, and so I want to get this bread out of here. If I'm just making like one thing in the mixer, then I will let the bread rise in the mixer bowl. But because it's cold outside, it's December, the bowl tends to be a little cold, and it will make your bread rise slower. And so I'm going to be using the mixer to make my cake next, and so I'm going to just transfer this to this bowl. And it does say to add a little oil, so I will just add a little unflavored oil here to the bowl, and I am going to just make sure that this is nicely oiled, and then we're covering this with a towel, and we're going to put it in a warm spot. Now, our warmest spot right now, because again it's winter, is in our bathroom. There's a heat vent in our bathroom, so if I keep this wrapped up nicely and kind of put it in the bathroom, it might rise a little faster, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so next we are going to get our chicken marinating, and then we're going to go forward with our honey cake. So what I have done today is I've separated some chicken thighs and some chicken legs into freezer bags, Ziploc bags, and I am going to add some marinade to them. This is this lemon garlicious marinade. We buy this at Aldi. You can get it at most major grocery stores, and it is absolutely delicious, and we love it. And you know, I could do like a simple roasted chicken. I could season it with whatever, but this marinade really just makes the best chicken. And so I'm going to use sort of the fact that it's kind of pre-made, saves me some time and energy, and I'm going to pour this on our chicken. So I'm going to aim to use probably half a bottle in each bag, but I don't think that's going to work. So I am going to probably have to open up my second bottle, which is completely fine. And I am putting this chicken on a tray so that way when I put it in my fridge to marinate for the rest of the afternoon before I cook it, it's not going to leak in my fridge on me. So I'm just going to kind of move my marinade around in my bag, make sure I have enough. And I think I am just going to end up using one whole bottle in this bag and a whole bottle in the other bag. Now, there's going to be 8 of us eating tonight, and so I'm making up a bunch of chicken thighs and a bunch of chicken legs. If it was just a smaller crowd, I think I could probably use 1 bottle of marinade and, you know, spread that over less chicken. But, you know, you don't want to skimp on marinade because you want your recipe to be delicious. And so handsome husband, very helpful, and went and got me another bottle of marinade from downstairs in our pantry. And so I guess it's good that we bought 2, huh? Yeah. So I'm just going to dump my second bottle in my chicken thighs. And like I said, this will now marinate. The chicken takes about an hour to cook. I would say the thighs take about an hour, and the legs take maybe 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes to cook. So these are going to marinate in the fridge until it's time to cook them. We're eating at 5:30, so probably I'll put my chicken in at like maybe 4:15. Something like that. So these are going to marinate for probably about 3.5 hours. We got a little bit of a late start today because we were wrapping Christmas gifts, and we got carried away and got all the gifts wrapped, which was great. But then I looked at the clock and realized, like, oh man, I better get going because we got people coming over. So I'll get this marinating in the fridge, and we're going to move on to the next recipe. Now it's time to make our honey cake. I made this the last time I made sort of a big Hanukkah dinner. I'm pretty sure I made this cake, and everybody loved it. And it's very reminiscent of something that my grandmother used to make when I was a kid. When you make honey cake, one of the ingredients that goes in it is a cup of coffee. If you don't want to use the cup of coffee, you could use a cup of tea. And my grandma's recipe that I have for her honey cake did say that. However, my grandma's recipe for her honey cake, when I looked at it the last time, looked like it was missing some ingredients, and I think that's what happens sometimes when you get grandma's recipes, is that they wrote it down because you asked them to, but sometimes they forget ingredients. So I actually went online and printed a honey cake and made that, and it's very comparable to what my grandma used to make, but like I said, I think her recipe might have some things missing from it. So, and I will link the recipes for everything I make today in the description box for you, but we're gonna get going with this honey cake. So my oven is preheated to 350 degrees. You can use either a bundt pan or an angel food pan. And so I'm going to use the bundt for this. And we're just going to, this is a non-stick bundt, but we're going to give it a good spray here. I think that there's enough fat in this recipe where it should not stick, but we'll just give it a good spray just in case. And so we are now going to combine our dry ingredients. So let me just slide this over so you can see what I'm doing. And so I have here my flour. It is 3½ cups of flour, and I'm going to mix my flour, baking powder, and baking soda. So there, baking powder, that's the baking soda. Okay, and then our salt and spices. So I use kosher salt for baking, and then the spices that go in here, it's cinnamon, cloves, allspice, and I believe, oh yeah, so cinnamon, cloves, and allspice, and that goes in there. And then when you have some dry ingredients that you want to mix, if you don't want to get out a sifter, you can just use a whisk, and that will help to mix those ingredients together, get rid of any lumps. And now that is ready to go in the mixer once our wet ingredients are ready to go. So now, move this back. Okay, and now we have to have oil, honey, sugar, brown sugar, eggs, vanilla, coffee, and orange juice. And we're gonna mix those together. So we have a cup of vegetable oil. Now this cake will be very, very moist. That is one of the best things about this cake is it, you know, there's no frosting, there's no nuts or anything in it, but it is a really delicious cake. It's not going to be dry. This amount of vegetable oil is going to create a really delicious cake. So 1 cup of vegetable oil, we've got a cup of honey. So that is going in. And we've got 1½ cups of white sugar. And we've got ½ cup of homemade brown sugar. And we have to add our eggs here and vanilla. So we're going to get 3 eggs right into our mixer. And that's the great part about this. If you didn't want to use a mixer for this, if you wanted to mix this by hand, you could. It doesn't seem like it would be too difficult to do. And I just had a little bit of eggshell get into my cake here. And the easiest thing to do, if you accidentally drop eggshell into your cake, is to use another piece of eggshell to scoop out your eggshell. That is the easiest way to get it. If you try to fish it out with your fingers, it's going to slide around on you. But if you accidentally get a little eggshell in there, just use a piece of eggshell to scoop it out, and it'll come right out. So 3 eggs and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that I measure vanilla extract with my heart. I do not measure it with a measuring spoon. So a teaspoon of that, and then we are adding a cup of coffee. We brewed 8 ounces of coffee a little while ago. We let it cool, and that is going in. And then we've got 3/4 of a cup of orange juice, and that is going in. So now we'll mix this together carefully. So I'm going to take my dry mix here, And I like to use a measuring cup to scoop in. There is a lot of liquid in this mixer, so I'm not going to plop in my whole big bowl here of dry ingredients because I don't want to make a mess. And I don't want to mess up this cake because half the ingredients splashed everywhere. So I'm just going to scoop in maybe about half of this flour mixture and then mix it in until it's almost completely mixed in. And then I'll mix in like the rest of it so that I don't overmix. And the spices in here, the allspice and the cloves and the cinnamon smell so good. This is going to be great. And we're almost completely mixed, and I will probably stop the mixer before it's completely mixed because I don't want to overmix. So I'm going to mix just a little bit more, and when I still see some flour streaks, that's when I'll stop it, give it a couple mixes by hand, and then get it in the pan. Now, I have made this cake before, and the batter will look very runny. I remember the last time I made it, I was very worried that it wasn't going to bake up properly because there's an awful lot of liquid in this recipe, and it doesn't seem like there's enough flour for the liquid, but trust me, it will work. I have made this before, and it came out great. And anytime I make a recipe, if I make any modifications to it, I will write on the recipe what modifications I made, and that way the next time I go to make it, I don't have to trust my memory. I will know exactly what I need to do. And so I never made any modifications to this recipe when I made it, so that means that it worked out and we loved it, and I will just stick with the same recipe now. So we're going to just make sure this is all completely mixed. We don't have any lumps of flour in here. And I do have my oven already preheated to 350 degrees. So we're going to get this in our pan. And I think I will put this on a tray just in case it wants to kind of bubble over when it cooks. If I remember correctly, last time I made it, that did not happen. But I don't like having to clean the inside of my oven if I don't have to. So I am just scraping the rest of this batter out of here, and then I will put this on a pan just to be safe, just to make sure that I don't make a mess in my oven. My oven's going to be busy today. We've got this cake to make, we've got bread, we've got our Tzimmes to bake, we have chicken to bake, so it is a good thing we have a double oven in this house because both of them are going to be working very hard. So I am going to get this in the oven, and I will show you what it looks like when it comes out. It's time to make our Tzimmes. So I haven't had this in a really long time. This was something I grew up eating. We always sort of had it on some holidays. And it is just a really warm and comforting dish. Now, sometimes I've seen Tzimmes made with beef in it, like beef short ribs. But this recipe just happens to be just all the vegetables. And so I believe there are variations where there is meat in this dish, but today we are going to make it meatless. So it is 2 pounds of carrots that we're peeling and we're going to cut up. And it's 4 big sweet potatoes that we're going to peel and cut up. And then the ingredient that might be a little bit surprising is prunes. And so I know that sounds crazy, but the prunes, when you bake them with your carrots and your sweet potatoes and some other things that I'll talk about in a second, they just add such great flavor. It the prunes really enhance sort of the sweetness of the carrots and the sweet potatoes. And so they just really pair really well together. And like I said, this is something I've grown up eating. And in a way, the prunes kind of just cook down into this dish and almost kind of become part of like the sauce. So anyway, if you don't like prunes, I do suggest giving this a try because it is delicious. And, you know, maybe you will decide that you love prunes after you try this. So I am just going to continue here peeling the carrots, and then I'm going to peel the sweet potatoes and cut them up. And then these get covered. They get, we put some orange juice, water, brown sugar, cinnamon and salt and honey on the prunes, carrots, and sweet potatoes, and we cover them, bake them in the oven for an hour. Then we're going to uncover them, dot them with some butter, and bake them just a little bit longer. And so this is going to bake for quite a while, so I want to get going on this so it has plenty of time to cook. And once I get everything peeled, I'll get like these peels out of the way, and then I'll chop everything up. I have peeled all the carrots and I've peeled the sweet potatoes, so now we just have to chop everything up. And so we have to peel and cut into about 1/2-inch chunks. That's what our recipe says to do. So I'm going to try my best to figure out how to cut everything uniformly. But I guess, I don't know, that's maybe about 1 inch. But I feel like the thinner pieces can be left a little longer, and then the thicker pieces can be a little shorter. So that will be fine because they're smaller. So I'm just going to keep going here until I have everything chopped up. And we're also going to put the prunes in there. And leftovers of this are just better and better as they sit. They're very tasty. Now, I imagine you could probably put some parsnips in this if you wanted to. We have only ever really made this with carrots and sweet potatoes, but I don't see why parsnips would be a bad move. And I think what I'm going to do is cut my sweet potatoes sort of in planks and then cut them in half and then get sort of our chunks that way. And this one's a little bit thicker than the previous, so I'll cut that into thirds and then into chunks. And I'm using a very large baking dish for this. The recipe said to use like a 9x12, but this is like an 11x13. Because I knew that 3 pounds of sweet potatoes and 2 pounds of carrots plus nearly a pound of prunes, it's going to take up a lot of space. So I don't want to overcrowd these, and so I used a larger pan. And we've got our last sweet potato. And I've got a little bit of yuck there that I just peeled off. Now, I find it is easier to make this recipe if you get nice big sweet potatoes. At my grocery store, they sell sweet potatoes like in a bag, and there were a bunch in the bag, but all those sweet potatoes in the bag were tiny. And I find with this recipe, it's much easier to cut into reasonable sized chunks and have everything be uniform if you get the bigger sweet potatoes. So that is what I did. I just bought them sort of in bulk rather than in a big bag because they just looked better. They were bigger and they looked nicer. So now we're going to put our prunes in. So we need about 14 ounces of prunes. So I have 16 ounces of prunes here. So I'll use one whole bag, 1 8-ounce bag, and then a little bit of my second bag. Well, almost all of my second bag. And these are already pitted, I believe, which means they don't have the pit in them. So I'll double check that as I cut them. But they do not have a pit in them. And prunes, if you're not aware, are just dried plums, and they are delicious. And they add lots of great sweetness to this. So I'm just cutting them in half. And like I said, the recipe calls for about 14 ounces of prunes, so I just left a little bit in that bag. And they're really good for snacks, so dried fruit is delicious. Now, this recipe does not call for apricots. I have seen some recipes for Tzimmes that call for some prunes and some apricots. You can do that. If you don't want the prunes and you want to eliminate them completely, you can. I do highly suggest trying them because they are delicious. But if you just don't even want to try the prunes, you could substitute apricots, or you could even do like half raisins, half apricots if you really don't want to do the prunes. Okay, so that is all the prunes. They're going in. And now we're going to make like a sauce, I guess, or almost like a braising liquid, because in a way these are getting covered and they're getting baked for an hour and then uncover and then cook for about another 45 minutes. So they're kind of going to braise in a way. And we are going to mix together something to go on the top of them, like a sauce. So we have a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. We've got some cinnamon and some salt here. We've got a cup of orange juice. We've also got a cup of water. And then we need 1 to 2 tablespoons of honey, and I am just going to pour, I've got just a little bit left in this jar of honey, so I'm just going to kind of pour 1 tablespoon. I'm not going to do 2 tablespoons. I'm just going to do approximately 1 tablespoon because we've got a lot of sweetness in here with the brown sugar. We've got a lot of sweetness in here, like the natural sweetness of the vegetables and the natural sweetness of the prunes. So I don't think we're going to need more than 1 tablespoon of honey. And then I'm just going to carefully give this a whisk to combine. And then this is going to go on top of our Tzimmes. So let me get this out of the way. Got some carrot peel hanging out. And this is going to go on top of our Tzimmes. I got some of my cinnamon is sticking to the side of my bowl here. So we're going to use this remaining liquid to get that out of there so we don't miss it. There we go. So that is going to be fantastic. Now the recipe does say pour over the vegetables, cover and bake. So this now is going to go in a 350-degree oven for 1 hour, and then I will show you what it looks like when we uncover it. And when we uncover it, we're going to dot some butter on the top and then cook for a little longer. So I'll show you that when we get there. Our honey cake came out of the oven. It did take about an hour to bake, and it baked here in my bundt pan, and I was very nervous to try to get this out of the pan with y'all watching, so I did it off camera. And as you can see, it actually came out pretty good. There's some little bits here like that sort of adhered to the bottom of the pan, and that's completely fine. I feel like this is a cake win because sometimes you know, flip over a bunt and then like a hunk is missing. So we've got just sort of little smatterings of the top of the cake that didn't perfectly come out of the pan, but I'd consider this a win. And then the nice thing is that these little bits down here of this honey cake become samples for everybody in the house while we wait patiently to eat this. So this is going to continue to cool on my cake plate here. And our Tzimmes is going in the oven in about 5 minutes. And in the meantime, our chicken broth for our matzo ball soup is ready. And so I just let this release the pressure cooker. And now I have a big pot of simmering chicken broth. Now what I'm going to do is take the carrots out and reserve them. We like to serve our matzo ball soup with some chicken shredded up and some carrot in the bowl with very fine egg noodles and then the matzo balls. And so I am going to kind of take out the other vegetables that we really just used for flavor, like the onion, the celery, the bay leaves, all of that. And I am going to get my chicken out of there and shred that up a bit and get that sort of ready. Now the matzo balls I'm going to cook right before we eat, and our latkes or potato pancakes I'm going to cook right before we eat because they're just not great sort of reheated. They're great fresh. And so this is kind of where we're at. We are still waiting for our challah dough to rise. It is taking a little bit of time. I suspect that it's just that there's a very small amount of yeast in the recipe, but also it's kind of cold in the house. So we're going to let that rise for the full 2 hours before we punch it down and then let it rise again. And we're just going to be patient with it. But in the meantime, we're going to get working on this soup. Our chicken soup is ready, so we have in our Instant Pot keeping warm, we've got all of our beautiful homemade chicken soup. Now, if you make your own broth and you find that it's kind of bland, what you can do to add extra flavor, besides adding just salt to it, is add a little bit of better than bouillon. So what I did was I took about 2 spoonfuls of better than bouillon, mixed them in a bowl with a little bit of my hot chicken broth, and then dumped that back in. I have not added any salt at all to my chicken broth in the process of cooking it. We don't tend to add a lot of salt to our food, and so adding that better than bouillon kind of concentrated chicken base to the chicken broth after it's cooked just adds a little bit of extra flavor to it without adding a tremendous amount of bad ingredients. And so that chicken broth will be ready to go when we serve our matzo ball soup for dinner. Over here I've got a bag of very fine egg noodles. I'm going to cook these up right before we sit down to eat, and we usually put a little of these in the bowl along with some chicken, some carrot, matzo ball, and broth. That's generally how we serve our matzo ball soup. So I have over here my cooked carrots that I reserved out of my Instant Pot, and then we pulled apart our chicken that cooked in the Instant Pot, and that's ready to go, and we will just reheat this. Found a bone. We'll reheat this when it's about time to eat. And what I might do is just sort of put this in a ladle and dip it into the boiling or bubbling chicken broth right before I plate it. Or if the chicken broth is hot enough and really bubbly, then I'll just put this in the bowl room temperature and the broth will do a very good job of heating it up. And this is our tray of sort of the remains of the chicken. That sounds terrible, but we pulled all the meat off of the chicken that came out of the Instant Pot. We've got some onions and celery and garlic here that cooked with the chicken, but we're done with this, and this is just going to go into the garbage. And so now I'm going to make my matzo ball. Now I make my matzo balls from a mix. I don't make them from scratch, and then I'll cook them right before we serve them. And really, they're basically like a dumpling, and they're just going to simmer in some boiling water, and that's how you cook them. So I'm going to make up the whole box of matzo balls, and so that means I have to take 4 eggs. And then we need 4 tablespoons of vegetable oil. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if you're not a fan of vegetable oil, that's fine. You can use another oil. Just make sure that it is unflavored. So I imagine maybe like a very light olive oil would be fine. but the recipe calls for vegetable oil. And then we're going to take our 2 packets of our matzo ball mix, and this is basically like matzo meal and a whole bunch of seasonings, so I didn't have to buy matzo meal myself and season it myself. Now, instead of the oil, you could substitute chicken fat. Chicken fat is typically called schmaltz. If you have chicken fat, you could use that instead of using the oil. And so I'm just going to whisk these up really well, because I want the matzo meal mix here, or the matzo ball mix, to absorb the liquid here. And then what we'll do, and I'll show you this, is just take spoonfuls of this and put it into boiling water, and it'll make dumplings. So we're just going to mix this together. I've got a little bit of that mix sort of stuck in my whisk, so it's a good thing I got that out of there, because there was still a little bit of dried mix in there. Our bread dough is continuing to rise, so after the first hour and a half, it didn't look like it rose enough, so I let it go for 2 hours. Then you punch the dough down, and now it's rising for another hour. Then I'm going to braid it and assemble it, which I'll show you, and then it will rise again for another 40 minutes, and then we'll bake it. So when my family gets here, we will have nice, fresh, hot bread right out of the oven, because that seems to just be how today is going. So our Tzimmes has cooked for the first hour, and I've uncovered it, and now I'm going to do the second part of the directions, which is basically to dot 4 tablespoons of butter on the top of this, and then we're going to put this back in the oven. And what we'll do is it's going to cook another 30 to 45 minutes. And what we're going to do is, like every 15 minutes, we're going to take this out of the oven and give it a stir, and then put it back in, because we want to evenly brown the vegetables a little bit, and we want the prunes and carrots and sweet potatoes to sort of evenly mix together. So I'm just dotting this with butter. And certainly if dairy was a concern, you could use like margarine, or you could use a vegan butter if you're not a family that consumes dairy. So we're just getting this butter on here. And now I'm going to get this back in the oven. It's still at 350, and like I said, it's going to cook for another, actually 45 to 60 minutes, not 30 to 45. 45 minutes to another hour. Every 15 minutes, we're going to stir it so that it browns. Our chicken is going to go in the oven in about 15 minutes, so I'm going to get that on our trays. Also, I have already cooked some noodles, so those fine egg noodles that you saw on the counter, these got cooked. They boiled for about 4 minutes, and now they are ready to go for when we have our soup. And our Tzimmes will get stirred every 15 minutes for the next hour or so. So we are going to get going on our chicken. So we'll get our chicken legs on this tray. These are some massive chicken legs. So normally I think like chicken legs cook for a little less time than chicken thighs, but these are so huge that they might need the full hour. I find chicken thighs, they need about an hour to cook. And you really can't overcook dark meat as easily as you can overcook white meat. So these legs are huge. And there will probably be leftovers, and that's fine. I'll send my grandmother and my mom and my dad and my aunt home with leftovers if they wish. And if not, well, we will have an easy meal one night this week, because then I won't have to cook. So now our chicken thighs are going to go on this tray. And I just line my trays with foil because it's easier to do dishes later. I just peel off the foil, and then I certainly do wash the pans, but it's a lot easier to wash them if they've been protected with the foil. All right, and so now we'll just arrange these so that they're not going to be too close to each other. If they're too close to each other, we have 9 chicken thighs. That's okay. I thought there were 8 in that package, but I guess there are 9. So that is fine. But if they're too close to each other, they won't really roast. They will end up just sort of steaming. And so now we are going to get these in the oven in about 10 minutes. I'm just going to set them to the side. So our challah dough is ready for me to shape, and then it will rise yet again. And so I need about a 9-ounce portion of dough and then about an 18-ounce portion of dough. So that is a little bit more than 9. Now it's less. Okay, that's about 9, and then so this should be about 18. Yes, it's a little over a pound. Okay, so what we're going to do is now shape this. So when you make challah, it's typically braided. It's a braided dough. So I'm just sort of gathering this into a ball, and then I'm going to separate this into 3 pieces. Okay, and then you basically roll each piece into like a log shape or I guess a rope shape. And then we are going to braid that, and that goes on the bottom of the pan. And then we're going to take the smaller piece of dough and also braid that and set it on top of the bottom braided dough, if that makes sense. So if it doesn't make sense, that's okay. I'll show you what I mean. But I'm just getting this dough sort of to cooperate because it's, I've just got to kind of get it together here. Get the dough to stick together. And then I'm going to roll this out. And then I do have my ruler just in case I need to check the length to make sure that it is long enough. And it doesn't want to seem to roll for me on the counter. I don't know why. It's fine though. I'm just going to make it work. But this should be about 18 inches or so. And if it's a little shorter, that's fine. I have made this before, and I remember that when I rolled it out to 18 inches that it was like really long. And it just didn't look as pretty as some of the store-bought challahs that I've had before because I just felt it was too long. So I think that the second time that I made this, I ended up making it more like 15 inches on the bottom instead of 18, and then I liked that better. So I think that's what I'm going to do this time. But it really doesn't matter exactly how long you have it. The basic thing is you're going to take your bread dough and you're going to braid it together, and then you're going to put your egg white wash on, and then you're going to add your second dough that's braided, and then you're going to bake it. And it's a beautiful bread. It's just, the presentation is really pretty, and then it's also really delicious. So this will bake once it has a chance to rise again. It's going to bake for about 40 minutes in a 375-degree oven. So our chicken is cooking at 375. Our Tzimmes continues to cook at 350. So the challah will share a little bit of space in the oven with our chicken. And I'm just going to make sure these pieces here are even because they're going to get braided together. So I don't want one to be too short and another to be too long. Okay, and then this is my third piece. And I'm not needing a tremendous amount of bench flour for this. It's not very sticky, which is good. So I'm not going to add a tremendous amount of flour to this because I don't want it to end up too tough. And it is not very difficult to braid a bread loaf. It might sound a little bit intimidating, but it's actually very easy to do. So now that I have my 3 pieces and they're all pretty even in length, I am going to kind of stick them together at the top here. So you just kind of squeeze your bread ends together, and then you're just basically going to braid So over, and you're just taking your outer piece and putting it over the center piece and repeating that. And so then that braided bread will go here on our tray. So that is step one. And I am going to take my egg whites and I'm going to do an egg wash here. So this is just egg whites and water, and we're going to brush this on top. This is going to give the other piece of bread something to stick to, but it's also going to make the finished bread very glossy and pretty. Okay, so that is our first one. And the same thing, we're just going to roll these out. And they're going to, this part of the bread is purposely going to be a little bit shorter than the one on the bottom. So you don't want it to be the exact same length. You want it to be just like a little less long. And then it'll look really beautiful when it bakes. And I'll show you what that looks like. But the bottom section of dough is bigger on purpose and should be longer. And then your top section should be shorter and a little smaller. And then this, like I said, is going to rise again for about another 30 to 45 minutes. I think we just want to see that it's rising again. I don't think it needs to like double in size or anything, but we do want it to be a little bit, you know, puffier when we go to put it in the oven. So I realize like this bread rises like 3 separate times, but that is very important when a bread recipe or any kind of recipe with yeast says to do that. You definitely want to follow those instructions. So I'm just checking to make sure that this is a good length. And like I said, this top one is going to be a little bit shorter than the bottom piece, and that is on purpose. Okay, and again, we're going to take our bread pieces or dough pieces here, and we're going to pinch them together at the top, and then we're just going to braid them. And then just pinch the ends together, and then this goes on top of this. And so now you see you have sort of 2 layers of your challah bread, and that is exactly what it's supposed to look like. And we're just going to add some egg wash to this. And then it is fine that I egg washed it. It can rise with the egg wash right on the top of it. I'm going to cover this with some saran wrap. Handsome husband is helping me because I do not have long arms. He handed me my saran. And I really want to keep this warm. My kitchen is a little cooler in the winter than it is during the summer, so breads seem to have a little bit harder time rising sometimes when it's not super warm in here. So this bread now is going to get covered. I'm going to keep it nice and cozy over here by my Instant Pot, which is on. And then I am going to get going on making some latkes. So we're on our last recipe for the day. Our chicken is cooking, our Tzimmes is cooking. We've already stirred it twice, and it smells so good in here. Our soup is in our Instant Pot. I've turned it off for now. Right before I go to serve it, I'm going to turn the Instant Pot to saute, which I believe will bring my broth to a boil. I will get my matzo balls cooking in about half an hour. And so that gives us time to put together our latkes. Now, latkes are basically a potato pancake. We prefer a very crispy version of a potato pancake. I've had some potato pancakes where the potatoes are ground up very finely, and it's more of like a, I guess, a doughy potato pancake, for lack of a better word. We like ours more like shredded potato style, and I will show you what that looks like. Now, you can mix in matzah meal for your dry ingredient with latkes, or you can use flour. Today we're going to use flour. Either one is fine, and we'll get you a delicious potato pancake either way. I guess it's more traditional to use the matzah meal, which you can buy at like your local grocery store, but again, it's not going to make a measurable difference. I don't think anybody's going to taste it and be like, well, did you use flour? So if you can't get your hands on matzah meal, there's no need to worry about that. So these potatoes, we've got 5 large potatoes. I weighed them. So the recipe that I looked up called for just 1 pound of potatoes made into potato pancakes, but there's 8 of us tonight, and I know that 1 pound of potato pancakes is definitely not going to be enough. These are probably going to be the thing on the table that gets eaten the fastest. They're kind of a once a year thing, and they're delicious, and so we do not tend to just make 1 pound of them. We're making 3 pounds of potatoes worth, so I'm tripling this recipe, and again, I will link recipes in the description for you. But you just have to make the amount of potato pancakes that you think your family would enjoy. We just definitely eat a lot of them. It's for sure what's going to happen here. And I think they might be enjoyed more so than any of the other things. Now, after I peel these, I'm going to give these a rinse, and then we're going to shred them in the food processor. You can shred these by hand, and many bruised knuckles or bloody knuckles have been obtained over the years from making potato pancakes the traditional way with a box grater, but I'm going to spare myself the agony, and I am going to use my food processor for this. And then I'll show you my trick to make sure that your potato pancakes are perfect texture-wise, and I will also show you the proper way to fry them. You do need to fry these. There's really no way around frying these. You can't not fry them, and you have to fry them in some oil, and so that is what we are going to do. Now I'm going to get these potato peels out of the way. I'll be right back, and then I will show you the next step. Okay, so these are going to go through the food processor, and they're going to get processed with some onions. The recipe said 1.5 medium onions. So I feel like the quantity of onions here I have is close enough to that. And I'm just going to get them peeled. And because these are all going in the food processor, I just kind of need to cut them into chunks so that I can fit them in the chute of the food processor. So you don't have to be super particular here about how you slice. You just want to make sure that you can get them in your food processor without trouble. So I'm just going to cut these into smaller pieces. And same thing with the potatoes. Those onions, I'm telling you, every time they got me. So anyway, I am going to now shred this all up, and then what I'm going to do is put my potatoes and onions as they get shredded in this colander over this bowl. Now, the secret to perfect potato pancakes is that you want to squeeze out as much liquid from the potatoes and onions after you shred them as possible. But at the bottom of your bowl, you'll get sort of this layer of starch, and I'll show you what it looks like. You want to leave that in to your potato pancake mix because it will help your potato pancakes stick together. When you fry them, they won't fall apart. So we're going to get shredding on these. Now for my food processor, I just have my shredding attachment at the top. I do not have the blade on the bottom, and this is the texture you want to get. You want your shredded potatoes. If I find big hunks of potatoes, I'll pull them out and I'll run them through again. But what we're going to do now is just get this into our colander and start that straining or draining on its own. Some liquid will drain out naturally on its own. The rest you're going to have to squeeze out with your hands. So now we go back to shred the rest. And again, if I have a couple of big hunks up here, that's okay. I'll take those out. And I'm going to get my potatoes and onions in there. And this is the last of it. So that will go in there. And again, if I find any big bits, I take them out. You don't want like big bits of potato or onion in your mixture. So we may have to chop up some of those by hand. That's okay, but you just don't want like big hunks of unprocessed potato or onion. So, all right, all of this then goes in our bowl. And I'm going to give these little bits a quick chop, and then I will show you how to get all the water out. Okay, so all of our potato and onion mixture is in this bowl, and what you now need to do is squeeze all the liquid out of it. So I have seen instructions and recipes where it says like wrap it in cheesecloth and that's fine. You can do that if you want to, but I just find that's like a whole step that isn't necessary. My hands can do the work, and it's not a problem. And if your bowl falls in, that's okay, because what we're going to do now is dump out some of this liquid. But what you'll see is in the bottom of this bowl, there's like white stuff. Hard to say. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but it's white stuff. That is the starch from the potatoes that you want to keep. So not all of the liquid that you squeeze out of the potatoes will be that amazing white starchy stuff. And so if I'm finding big hunks of onion or whatever, I'm taking them out. But we just want to keep squeezing this potato mixture until really we can't get any more liquid out of it. And it might take, 2 or 3 times through the bowl like this to get all of the liquid out, but that is what you want. You want as much of the liquid out as possible, and if you do that and you save that little layer of that white potato starch at the bottom, then you will end up with the perfect crispy potato pancakes. And so I'm just going to keep squeezing out this liquid, and then I will show you at the end how much potato starch I have at the bottom. So I think I've squeezed as much out of here as I can get, and we've just got a little bit more liquid to pour off. And then you can see on the bottom of the bowl here now we have a whole bunch of this white sort of potato starch, and that is exactly what you want to keep in your potato pancakes. So now I put my squeezed out potatoes in here, and we are going to now add some baking powder, salt, pepper, 3 eggs, and 3/4 cup of flour. So 3/4 cup of flour can go right on there. Some pepper. I'm not going to specifically measure the pepper. It says 3/4 teaspoon of pepper, but I feel like that's probably fine. And then we need some salt. It says 3 teaspoons of fine sea salt. Now, I don't think I'm going to add quite that much salt. 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon of salt. I think I'm just going to sprinkle over maybe like 2 pinches. People can always add additional salt to their potato pancakes if they want at the table. I don't like adding a lot of salt to things. And also, these get served with sour cream and applesauce. And so some people in the family like to put applesauce on top of their potato pancakes. Some people like to put sour cream. Some people like to just eat them plain, but we serve those on the side. And so adding too much salt to this, I don't find the need to do that. And we're going to add 3 eggs, and we need 3 teaspoons of baking powder. That's a tablespoon. So 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon. The baking powder in here is also going to help these to be like light and fluffy and crispy. So baking powder. And then I've got 3 eggs. And these are room temperature. And it is almost time to start frying these. Now, to make this go a little bit faster, I usually use 2 pans at a time. And so we'll get the 2 pans of potato pancakes going at one time just so that they get cooked faster. And then what you can do is put them on a cookie sheet or a baking sheet with just a piece of parchment or something, and you can put them in your oven at a low temperature and just keep them warm until you serve them. So I am going to make sure I have everything. So potatoes, flour, onion, baking powder, salt, pepper, and my eggs. Okay, so I'm going to mix these now with my hands. And I just want to get everything all combined because we squeezed out all that liquid. Oh, and I'm kind of rubbing the potato mixture on the bottom there so that I make sure I get that starch mixed back in to my potato pancake batter here, because that's basically what this is. It's a potato pancake batter. And I advise mixing this with your hands because you will get it combined much better if you do it with your hands. And like I said, getting that starch up off the bottom and into your mix is important. I keep finding big hunks of onion and I'm just pulling them out. That's fine. Okay, and I'm going to let this sit for a few minutes because I'm also going to start cooking my matzo balls. So matzo balls are going to cook for about 20 minutes. So while the matzo balls are boiling, I will also start frying these, and I will show you what that looks like over on the stove. It is time to fry some potato pancakes and to make some matzo balls. So when I make my potato pancakes, I again use my hands to sort of plop the potato pancake mix here in my pan. And then I just carefully, without sticking my fingers in the oil, press down my potato pancake into sort of a round shape and just make sure that it's even. I don't want it to be like thicker in the center and thinner on the outside. And this is about the size that we make them. And again, this is vegetable oil. And now the biggest thing is to just leave them alone. Do not touch them. Don't try to flip them too soon. Don't mess with them. Wait until you start to see brown around the edges. That is when it is time to flip them. You don't want to rip them apart with your spatula while you're trying to flip them too soon. Now I have another pan going. And the way I can tell that my pan is ready to go is that I will put a drip of water in the pan. And if the pan starts to sizzle, then I know it's ready. So there, we've got a second pan, and it's over here. And I'm going to fry like 8 at a time. And as soon as I've got these going, I'm going to start putting my matzo balls in my pan to cook. And like I said, the biggest thing is you don't want to disturb these too soon. So over here we've got a pot of water that came to a boil. And now this is where we're going to cook our matzo balls. And so I've got my matzo ball dough here and a spoon. And all I'm going to do is wet my hands. So your hands need to be wet to shape your matzo balls, and then you just basically take like a spoonful of your matzo ball batter, I guess, or dough. And my grandma always used to make these the size of a walnut because they do puff up. So this is about the size that you want, and you drop them in your boiling water. And they are basically a delicious dumpling that you are then going to float in your soup. And I'm just going to get these going while my potatoes fry. And if your hands start to get dry, you just re-wet them. And you can make your matzo balls pretty much any size that you want, but in our house we sort of always did like the size of a walnut in the shell. And when all of my matzo balls are shaped, I will cover the pot and they simmer on a low heat for 20 minutes. Now, in our house, we like our matzo balls to be nice and soft and fluffy. I know some households like a firmer, denser matzo ball. This is always the recipe that I have used to make them. This is the mix that I have used every time. And mine have never come out dense. I don't really know the secret to making them like denser because we tend to not like them that way. I think like my aunt likes them denser, but everybody else likes them fluffy. So we tend to go with the fluffy ones. And our potato pancakes in my front pan might be ready to flip soon. So I'm just getting my last couple matzo balls in the pot. And there we go. And that now is simmering, and I will cover these. And we will let them simmer for 20 minutes. It is time to flip these. And this is exactly what you want. You want nice, brown, crispy potato pancakes. And if they release easily off the bottom of the pan, then you know they are ready to flip. So now I can probably fit another one in here, and I'm going to turn this heat down a little bit. These ones are really sizzling good. So I'll get another potato pancake in here, cooking. And my matzo balls are over here simmering. I'm just going to turn them down a little bit, because we don't want them really boiling. I think we want them simmering. And perhaps boiling them might be the thing that makes them really dense, and simmering them might make them fluffy. I'm not exactly sure. Like I said, we've always had the fluffy ones. I'm going to check my latkes in this back pan here. And yep, they are ready to flip. Just be careful when you are working with hot oil that you do not burn yourself. And now that these are flipped, I can add another one to that pan. And that will cook, and these will be ready to flip. And our matzo balls are simmering, and so dinner is coming together. Now when these are done cooking on both sides, I'm going to put them on a sheet tray. I have just a pan here lined with a paper bag. You can use a paper bag, you can use paper towels, but you want something that's going to absorb the excess grease and oil out of the potato pancakes. You want them to stay crispy, you don't want them to get mushy, and so that is the way that you do that. This is our second batch of latkes, and our matzo balls are just simmering away back here. I've got my Instant Pot now on saute, so I'm bringing my chicken broth back to a boil here. So our soup will be nice and piping hot when we go to eat it. And when these matzo balls are done, the full 20 minutes has gone by, I'm just going to turn them off and leave them in the pot, because I will serve them right from the pot with a slotted spoon just to drain off any extra moisture. The potatoes we're continuing to make are latkes, and we do still have some more potato mixture, and we will just keep making it till we're out of potato mixture, and any excess liquid that forms in the bottom of this bowl, I will just avoid putting in the pan if at all possible, because sometimes little extra moisture will seep out of the potatoes as they sit, and that's fine. But it looks like we can probably make another 12 or so potato pancakes. We've got probably 12 in, or 8 done, 8 more cooking, and maybe 12 more to go. So our day of cooking is complete and my family is arriving and we're going to be eating very soon. So our chicken legs are still in the oven. They're finishing up, but we have our chicken thighs here and our tzimmes. We've got our homemade challah that we made, and this came out great and smells amazing. And then we've got our potato pancakes that are ready to go. So I would like to thank you for watching. I do appreciate that you're here in the Pickup Kitchen with me. If you haven't already, please remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Good night.